Welcome back to our module on being and becoming. In the first session, we really focused on the being dimension of that. And now we're going to lean into the becoming dimension. So being is key, clearly foundational to the way that we show up and are able to be present with what's going on in the world. But the question then arises, how do we move into action from that space of being? And there's been some very interesting work done through the Enlightened Next community, for example, that this image is a depiction of. So we don't need to go into the details of the image for now, but just notice two things. The blue piece at the bottom really represents the ground of being. So that space that we rest in, that is always present, whatever is going on. And then the yellow-orange space represents what happens as we move into action from that space of being. And so what I'm going to talk through are a number of what have been called tenets. They're key kind of tips or principles or guidelines that help us to orient ourselves and move forward from a space of clarity and freedom as we attempt to do our work in the world. They've certainly helped me on my path to find a way to be really connected to what's of meaning in my work and to make sure that I'm as aligned as possible with what's most needed in the world rather than just projecting my own needs, let's say, into the things that I'm doing. So the first of these tenets is clarity of intention. And what this points to is the fact that we need to be really clear on what it is that we're wanting if we're going to move into this space of freedom and wholeness in our work. Are we really choosing to do that? Are we really choosing to be as effective as we can in our work and to do all that we can to realize our highest potential? If we're clear about that intention, then we'll be able to develop the disciplines and the practices that will take us there. If we're not clear about that intention, then we're likely to fall back and find excuses about why we're not doing it. So it's very important initially that we make the choice to want to do all that's possible for us to be as effective as we can and realize our potential. The second tenet is called the law of volitionality. And what volitionality really means is will, free will, and choice. So this is a reminder that in every moment, in everything that we're doing, we have a choice. How are we going to choose to show up? Are we going to choose to show up from a place where we're kind of afraid of things or trying to manage how other people see us or worried about this and that? Or are we going to choose to respond and show up from a place of clarity, freedom, and centeredness? And that's a choice. In every moment, we can choose. Are we going to respond or act from that basic relaxation in the ground of being, from the freedom and from our highest potential? Or are we going to choose to be our smaller selves, rooted in the past, with all the kind of things that we're continually worrying about, which of course is going to distort the decision that we take and make it less relevant and appropriate for what's really needed in the world at that moment. So that's the law of volitionality. The third tenet is called face everything and avoid nothing. And for me, this has been one of the most powerful tenets to work with. What it means is that whatever comes at us, we have to face it. We choose to face it because everything, as we experienced in the previous session, everything that is present is just there. And if we choose to deny some of it, then we're denying a part of what's true in this moment. And we're normally doing that because we're afraid somewhere in ourselves. We're worried about what will happen if I really face this. So, a colleague is irritated at you, or you're feeling, worried that somebody is is judging you in a certain way. Well, you can just ignore it or pretend you're ignoring it, because actually what happens is it worms away inside of you and eats away, and you're busy with it in the background. But if you were just to face it and go and check in with your colleagues, like, I get this feeling that, then you begin to make explicit something that has been implicit or under the surface. And when we really choose to face everything and avoid nothing, then it releases a lot of energy and power, because we don't have to be afraid of anything. When we're grounded in that fundamental ground of being, where everything just is the way it is and there's nothing we can do about it, then we can really choose to face it all without worry. And we'll see what happens. When we name it, when we face it, when we engage it, then we can trust that something will unfold, and it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. We have all these ideas that, if I do this, that is going to happen. Well, is that really true? So this is the invitation to really look everything in the eye, face it all, and avoid nothing. It relates to some work that was done by one of Shell's top scenarios people, Arie de Geus, a Dutchman. And he said one of the main reasons that change initiatives fail is because people refuse to look reality in the eye. They refuse to really see what's going on because it's too scary, or it disturbs us too much, or it means we might have to change too much. So particularly given the circumstances that we're in right now, the big changes that are going on, it's very important that we face it all, allow it to be there, and that will give us the information and the energy to engage it in a way that's likely to be most effective. The fourth tenet is called the truth of impersonality. So what does that really mean? Impersonality. It means it's not personal. So often we get into a story that says that everything that we do is because of us, because of me. And it's a position that assumes that we are some separate being, completely independent of the rest of the world around us. Well, when we accept that we are actually part of a far bigger process of life that's going on all around us, that everything is interconnected with everything else, then we can never assume that it's all my fault or it's all because of me. That's a game that our little ego plays to kind of boost us in our self-belief. But it's fundamentally not true that it's all because of me. There's a far bigger process going on around us. And the moment that we can accept that fundamentally it's not about me and it's not because of me, that brings a big relaxation into the way we engage the world. Because we don't spend our time worrying about, oh no, maybe I did that wrong, or why did that happen that way, or on the other side, boost ourselves up and go, hey, it's because of me, that this went, or look how good I am in my personal development and everything else. No, it allows us to see ourselves as part of a bigger life process that keeps us connected into the rest of life, brings a bit of humility with it, and allows us to really be present with everything else around us rather than kind of focus in on ourselves the whole time. And the final tenet here is for the sake of the whole. For the sake of the whole. We do things for the good of the whole. And it's one of the traps sometimes we see in the personal development movement, that why do people get into personal development? Is it because really what we want to be able to do is tell ourselves that we're doing the right thing? It's personal development in a search to keep improving ourselves and show the world that we're better? Well, if you root it in this context, it's for the sake of the whole, then we do our inner work because we know that that will enable us to be of greater service to the world around us. So it puts the work that we do, the study that you're doing, the personal development modules, all into a far bigger context, and says we're not just doing it because we think it's important, but we're doing it because it will allow us to be of greater service. What we also know from a lot of the new scientific research is that as we make a difference, as we change something in ourselves, we're making it easier for others to do the same. That there are fields of information that we're a part of, and as we start to change behaviors in ourselves, it starts to impact other people's behaviors around us. So if you really think about that, the interconnectedness that implies, that brings with it significant responsibility. That in every moment, every choice I make about what I do is not just affecting me, but it's setting a pattern out there that's going to make it easier for others to access that kind of behavior. So if we choose to think about things positively, it'll enhance the general positive feeling in the world and enable others to think more positively. If we start getting grumpy and negative and withdraw into ourselves, then that's the pattern that we're encouraging in the world as well. So the work that we do for ourselves, the study that we're engaged in, if we can hold that in the context of for the sake of the whole, then it also releases us and makes sure that we don't get caught up in our own stories about why we're doing this for ourselves, but puts it in a bigger context of service. So those 5 are very useful practices that I have found in my own work. And what I'm going to suggest you do for your personal development module following this module is to take time every day to just contemplate those 5 tenets. Just to sit with them and feel into what it means for you if you were to take that tenet seriously, if you were to practice them. And just notice how that starts to engage the way you see yourself and relate to what happens around you. So another nice piece of the model here is these 4 qualities which they describe as emerging once you start to practice these kind of tenets. And the 4 qualities are, you can see them on the model kind of swirling around the white light at the center. So for example, we can start with purity of motive. This is like what happens when we practice the tenets. We get to this purity of motive. That what is the reason for what we're doing is clearly aligned with the broader needs of life, rather than just our own projections for wanting to be seen to be important or seen to be good in the world. So there's a purity of motive that emerges. There is a natural hierarchy that emerges. And what that means is that, everybody finds their place. So we find what we're good at, what our contribution is. Others find their place in what they're good at. And there's no worry about, am I going to be seen as better than the other? There's just a natural hierarchy that emerges of people some people are better at some things and some people are better at other things. And it allows a natural self-organization of people's qualities and talents to come into play, where we can just get on and do the things that need to be done and not be so kind of self-absorbed with how people are going to see me and whether they see me as better or not than somebody else. Integrity in action points to the fact that as we embrace these kind of tenets and work on them, that as we move into our action, we're continually trying to align what we're doing with the good of the whole, for the sake of the whole. So our action is always aligned with something bigger than ourselves. And evolutionary tension, the last of them, as we engage the world from this kind of freedom and this deep relaxation in the ground of being, we'll notice that it creates tension in the space around us. That we're trying to move somewhere or we're showing up in a certain way, and that creates stretch, because after all, we're trying to create transformation and change, and that's likely to create tension. So the question is, in that tension, how we can hold it, not judge it, but allow it to be there and see in that tension where life wants to move to take the next natural step. So those are 4 qualities, which we can expect to emerge as we start to live our lives in this way, grounded in this deeper ground of being and embracing some of these practices that allow us to show up with freedom and integrity as we do our work. So you have a chance to try to integrate some of this now in the integration tasks. And then when we come back to the next session, we'll be looking more at how do we look after ourselves in our physical well-being, and how do we maintain our vitality and energy in the world as we go into our work.